Hey everyone, I'm popping on before the podcast here to let you know that this episode is actually sponsored. We are sponsored by Metal Fab Tokens, and yes, Fab does stand for Flesh and Blood. So Metal Fab Tokens is a company. It's actually there's the guy that owns it used to live locally to me. Moved back to San Diego recently, but it started in Flesh and Blood, and the idea is basically to take those little plastic flimsy tokens or cardboard tokens and make them well-made metal pieces, right? So like what does this look like? They could be damage counters, could be a multitude of things, but in Lorcana specifically they do have the damage counters, but I can actually show you a piece. I have one today. So this one here is one of the lore counters. So it's fully metal. You can kind of hear that, and it counts up to 10 lore. And on the flip side, same thing. You go from 10 to 20. Full metal, very well made. Metal Fab Tokens is a hit in Flesh and Blood. They work directly with Legend Story Studios, the publisher. They have booths all the time. They also sponsor a professional team. The guy behind it, Brandon, is someone I've known for a few years now. He's definitely a solid person in the space. So they do Flesh and Blood tokens, of course, but they've also expanded to Lorcana. So they have the token that I showed you, as well as damage counters, willpower counters, literally everything you'll need. And the products are genuinely high quality. On top of that, Podcana is working with Brandon and Metal Fab Tokens directly to do all of our merch. You guys have probably been hearing about our merch. If you're in the Podcana Discord, you've seen pictures of the merch. All of that is being done with Metal Fab Tokens, and those things will be for sale on the Metal Fab Tokens website. So we have a pretty in-depth partnership working with them now. So in addition to sponsoring this episode of the podcast, Metal Fab Tokens is going to be helping us do all of the merch we're going to be delivering to you. So it's going to be t-shirts, dice, play mats. We're going to have a Podcana version of this as well with Podcana branding. So big things to come. If you want to check out Metal Fab Tokens, there's going to be a link in the description of this YouTube video. Just go show them some love. It's big news for us here at Podcana. We've been seeing a lot of success recently, so to get a sponsor is really cool for us, and we're happy to work with Brandon. So once again, Metal Fab Tokens link will be in the description. Stay tuned for Podcana merchandise coming. We're sorting out the last few pieces of logistics, and we're going to get it to you as soon as possible, so you 47%ers can rep your second turn advantage at these big events, including Atlanta, Chicago, Lille, any of the events. Would love to see people showing up in the t-shirts, so I'm super excited for that. Anyway, for this episode, we are joined by rank 1 player, or previous, maybe current. Rank 1 is a very fickle thing right now, but we are joined by Savjz to talk about the best decks in the format for the Store Championships specifically. Savjz has been playing a lot of Amber Steel. It's really funny because last time we had Savjz on, he prefaced coming on the episode was like, "Oh, I'm not comfortable talking about competitive. Just want to talk about like general stuff." And then as soon as he left the podcast, he went and became one of the best players in the game. So yeah, now he's back on the podcast to talk about it from a competitive point of view. I think y'all really enjoy this episode. We also have a deck tech coming out most likely soon after this with a Sapphire Ruby list that we're all very, very proud of on YouTube. So check that out. And yeah, enjoy the episode, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Podcana episode 48. This week we are joined by rank 1 phenom Savjz. Savjz, welcome to the podcast. I've been watching a lot of your streams recently. The funniest thing about having you back on the podcast, and we've talked about this sort of post the episode that you came on, is when you came on, you were very like, he prefaced us, he was like, guys, I've been playing much. I can't talk too much about the competitive stuff. I'm just interested in the game though. And, we don't have to go too deep. And then, we have our conversation. It's good. And next thing I know, Savjz is Grandmaster, rank 1 in Lorcana, just like one of the best players in the game. And it's just, it was kind of funny to see your journey. Anyway, how have you been? How's Lorcana going? How's streaming? How's streaming the game been for you? Because I know prior to now streaming Lorcana, you're primarily just Hearthstone, right?
I've done some other games in between, but yeah, like I basically come from like Hearthstone right now. Like it's been a year since I've done the Battleground stuff and Magic and all that. So yeah, from Hearthstone. Yeah, a lot has happened since I was last on the podcast. And when I told you guys that like you guys know the meta and like I don't really know that well what's going on, I actually meant it. But then like it's just everything happened so fast. Like I started playing because I was like waiting for the Hearthstone expansion to drop, and then the Hearthstone expansion dropped, and then I didn't like it, and I'm just like, okay, well, I don't want to play Hearthstone, so I just kept playing Lorcana instead. And my cat is hungry. But anyway, so yeah, thanks for having me again. And I forgot what I was about to say, but yeah, a lot has happened. Rank 1, there's been like these crazy battles for the number 1 spot as of late, and I'll talk about the YouTube later, but I just like yesterday was one of the craziest days, and I'm not gonna spoil anything because I'm gonna make a video of it later. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how has the rank 1 grind been? Have you found it to be rewarding, frustrating? Like, is it, and how hard is it, would you say, compared to something like Hearthstone? How has the rank 1 grind been on Pixelborn?
It's a little like anxiety inducing because like the reality is that you gain very little points when you win, and when you lose a lot. So if you lose one game and it's against someone who's low ranked, you might lose 24 points, and then like unless you queue into someone who's like happened luckily, because there's not that many like people at those rankings queuing. So unless you happen to queue into one of the people who have points, you need to win like 4 best of 3s or something to like just make back the points that you lost. So it can be a little frustrating, but it's fun. It's like a cool, fun little challenge. And sometimes when somebody passes me by, I almost feel like, oh yeah, I can play again. So it's fun.
It's definitely been exciting. All right, I'm just going to pass it over to Moin and Kala, just checking on how you guys have been doing. Kala, I saw you threw up a stream there. We're playing some Green Steel in preparation for the Store Championships. Moin, not too sure what you've been playing. I know you crept back up to top 25 on the hardcore leaderboard there for a bit. But yeah, how's it been going for you guys?
Yeah, I've been playing a lot more than I usually play, and I already play a lot usually. It's so basically this week, or since last week, I think everyone wants to get the coaching in for set championships. So this week I'm coaching like 15 hours, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I also put in like 30 minutes at least for prep for every session. So that's been a lot of fun, and also I've finally decided to actually order some cards. So I have like 15 different orders just to get a single deck together. Every order but one has arrived, so I should be good to go for the weekend of set championships.
Nice. Go.
Nice. Yeah, I went to a winner box on Sunday, which was actually quite fun. It was for a set 1 box, which was really cool because there was only 8 of us, and like whatever cards you kind of won out of that, most of them were pretty high value. I think one guy won like 3 packs and got a Bell and a Rapunzel, and was like, oh my god, just absolutely insane cards out of those. But besides that, am I here? Oh yeah, sorry, I probably cut a little bit. Yeah, besides that, I've just been practicing on Pixelborn, trying to figure out what deck I want to play for set championship. And I don't want to say I've been struggling, but for me personally, this is not a bad thing, but it's quite difficult when I was kind of feeling I wanted to play red-blue, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of Amber Steel in my local meta, but as I have a shared collection, my fiance has claimed those colors, but she plays them better than me, that's all I'll say. So it's really exciting, right? I find the concept of stuff like set championships really interesting, because everyone online is like, oh, like what's the best deck to play? What's the best deck to play? And there's really no answer to that. The answer is you need to try your best to get a read on your local meta, and then also if you're going to a set championships that's not in a local meta, it's just kind of a challenge. You want to try bring a deck that you feel is going to perform the most consistent overall, depending on what decks are just popular in the meta at the moment. And I find that really exciting. I find it really exciting to try and find the deck that fits my playstyle as well. One thing I've been advising to a lot of people who've been asking me that question, what is the best deck to play? Comfortability is a huge thing. As long as you know how to pilot a deck well, like this is one of the few metas where I would honestly say there's probably at least like 5 or 6 super viable decks that if you know how to pilot it correctly, you could win a store championships. Whereas in set 1 and set 2, it was like, oh yeah, there's like 2, maybe 3, you know?
Yeah, I think super viable is actually like a good descriptor. Speaking of, what is the best deck to play, that is going to be this week's main topic, which we'll get to after some headlines in the building section. I was also waffling between some decks until I found our Lord and Savior Red Blue, and now I'm definitely leaning towards that deck. It seems very, very good. But speaking of Red Blue, we had the biggest Lorcana tournament I think yet, or at least the biggest one online. It was the Thea Pack tournament, $10,000 tournament. I have the results pulled up here. and we can just run through the top 8 placements. So top 8 was in first, we have red, blue. In second, we have blue, steel. In third, ruby, amethyst. In fourth, green, steel. In fifth, blue, steel. Sixth, red, blue. Seventh, green, amethyst or emerald amethyst. And then finally, I think that's, yes, at number 8 here is going to be another green, steel. What are y'all thinking about the representation of this top 8? Do you think that it's representative of the metagame that you are expecting at your store championships coming up here this weekend?
I would say mostly yes, except it is surprising that in this major tournament an Amber Steel didn't sneak into the top 8, because that deck has been performing extremely well in the past 3 weeks, honestly. I mean, it topped tournaments, like on most major tournaments, it was Amber Steel winning it. So a little bit surprising to see that it didn't make it into the top 8. But I think if you looked at the overall deck representation, there was probably a lot of them in there. I know we're kind of diving a little bit down here to the top 16 as well, but like we even saw stuff like there was an Amethyst Steel that made it in the top 16. There was a Ruby Amber Mufasa deck as well. So there's like a few of these decks that can kind of pop up out of nowhere. And they're like super, super interesting, honestly. So, yeah, for me at least, it's the Amber Steel. I'm surprised that didn't make it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking towards Amber Steel, that's the deck that you've been playing on ladder, Savjz. How do you feel that deck is currently positioned? And were you also surprised to not see in the top 8? Obviously, it put multiple appearances into the top 16 here. I think it's like 3 or 4. Brennan DeCandio made it to top 16. I'm just checking his deck real quick to see if it has 60 cards. Nope, it has 62 cards. So definitely on the Candio special right there.
Yeah, so I played in that event, and I actually played Amber Steel, and I just missed out on top 16 with tiebreakers. Like I had the same 18 as like a lot of people did, but I had one of the weaker tiebreakers. So I was like, even though most people made it with that score, my loss was basically so early on. Amber Steel, if you asked me 24 hours ago, I would have told you that it's easily by far the best deck. But since then, there's been a bit of a development because, like, okay, so my version is like it's very fast, like Zen Zai, the school of thought, like where it's like super low curving and like no Tinkerbells and no beasts, like, and I've actually had a really good like win rate against blue red, which is normally hunts down the deck and all that. But I found a terrible matchup in Ruby Amethyst somehow, and I'm like dreading it a little bit. I'm not so convinced anymore. Like everything changed very quickly on that. Like I played against the Ruby Amethyst a bunch of times with the fast version and fast version of Amber Steel. I actually started to think like, okay, like this is like not good. Like because we can't get I'm playing Pride Lands and not Flutes. Maybe Flutes would help a little bit, but it's just like closing out the games is just like. It's really hard, like they really don't run out of cards, and then like Madame Medusa is such a force to be reckoned with. Like it kills almost anything. It's just like, wow, I can't get to 20 fast enough. Like there's always those starts where you just where you get like small Robin Hood and big Robin Hood, and then you have some songs to sing with that. You can always win, but like it seems like unfavored. So, but I do think it's still one of the. I believe we had 3 decks in the tier 1. I do think it's one of the tier 1 decks, but I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the best one.
Boy,
it's interesting because all of the Amber Steel inherently you think just beats Ruby Amethyst, and then Pride Lands is I think a version that's like in most matchup it is even better than the Lantern or the Flute versions, but it's the one version that's actually not favored against Ruby Amethyst because they're so good at dealing with the Pride Lands and you can't finish the game at once.
I just feel like the easiest wins, but like from the set championships, like with that list, and I was so like set on it. It's just I know I'm repeating myself just a tiny bit, but like it was so frustrating to like discover, and we all know that like Ruby Amethyst is one of those decks that is oftentimes played even more when it comes to like the paper tournaments, partially because of like the history of it doing so well in set 1, set 2. So it's more likely to run into for anyone to run into Ruby Amethyst in the local game store than it is on Pixelborn, I would say.
So what are the top 3 tier 1 decks in your opinion?
So these are like funnily enough, like I saw you guys had like idea on like what 3 decks are tier 1. And those are exactly the color combinations that I've been using the past 3 weeks. Like those, I haven't played any other deck to get the rank 1 because it's been going back and forth. And I think I lost it like 5 times. I gained it 5 times, and it's always been one of those three. It's the two decks that can use Whole New World best, and it's the one deck that, generally speaking, hunts down Whole New World. So it's a blue steel, or like sapphire steel, amber steel, which are like, because the Whole New World, in my view, is just the best card in the game. It's just so good if you know what you're doing. And then then sapphire ruby is just like this crazy deck that has like the highest card quality of any deck in the game, like easily. Like it's just the best cards, but it's sort of like too slow at times, and you run out of cards. But good news, your opponent is going to give you a new hand, and when the new hand happens, it's like you gain more value out of it than the player who played the New World quite often.
Yeah, it's interesting because when talking about like the tiers of decks in the metagame, I think that I would really split it between tier 1 decks, and I wouldn't even call, like, I feel like it's a stretch to call the decks after that tier 2 decks. I call them tier 1.5 decks because they're so close, and those decks are so good in their own right. But it really does feel like there is a dynamic between you either want to be the best, or in sort of tied for the best Whole New World deck, or you want to be the deck that absolutely dunks on a Whole New World. That just feels like that's where our metagame sort of is right now. It's kind of warped around that card completely. At least that's my opinion. Moin, do you hold the same school of thought?
Somewhat, but I think it's more nuanced than that. As, for example, Ruby Amethyst is also like a very good deck that just is very efficient at using its resources and has its own place in the meta. And then also Emerald Steel has some very, very potent draws, especially on the play. So both of those decks, I think, are also very close to the top decks.
Yeah. So for that main topic, we're going to talk about those tier 1 and tier 1.5 decks and the positives and negatives of playing them. So we're going to leave that for the main topic. Just want to hit a few more headlines here. One is that we opened a Podcana Discord, so you can check the link in the description to go there. It's got everything you need. We've got specific channels for specific ink combinations, upcoming tournaments, all that good stuff, and all of our for the merch that we talked about. It's actually pretty close to being implemented. You can see some previews on Discord as well. We should have that coming out in the next couple weeks. With that, before we get to the main topic, we're going to head to our spilled ink section. So Kawa, I'll pass over to you. This is our listener question section. If you want to get your question read out in next week's podcast, you can shoot us a comment on YouTube, or now you can go post in Discord because there's a spilled ink channel.
Awesome. All right. First one's from Pay No Heed. Thanks for the shout out, guys. Always happy to help the gang out. Let's say your opponent missed his location trigger. They are on 0 lore and you have a 2/8 Ursula in hand. Opponent loses a lore and you draw a card for each lore lost. Would you call a judge to get it added or wait until the next turn, knowing it's a game rule violation and a warning will be issued if you call a judge? This is before we get into this one, it's actually quite funny. This seems like a meme that's going around on Twitter at the moment, where a lot of people are kind of saying, imagine you're in this, you're at the set championships, not quite as competitive as the Lorcana challenge, and your opponent plays a let it go on your Cogsworth. What do? Do you make them target their own card? You call a judge? And it's so funny seeing some people's reactions. So here's an interesting one for you
That's
guys.
an age-old thing, by the way. The morality of card game rules in a card game. It's like a discussion I've seen been had in every single paper card game. I think that the shortest way to answer that is like pretty much every situation you just call a judge and you have them sorted out because they're the arbiters and you are not. This question to catch you up on, Savjz, is we had some initial questions regarding like mislocation lore, mistriggers in general, and the sort of responsibility of game rule violations, in particular to things like mislocation lore. It is responsible of both parties from what we understand. This person's basically posing a situation where you would benefit from the lore being sort of counted when it was not by your opponents, asking sort of when you, if you would call them over and get the game rule violation. My answer is like, absolutely, I would take the game rule violation because you should be doing that anyway. I guess in some situations it's advantageous to just kind of let it pass, but yeah, I think that's the essence of the question here.
And also, if you realize it on the same turn, it's not even a game rule violation, is it?
I don't think not with lore. No, not lore off location.
So on the same turn, you could say it even without game rule violation, and then if their turn passes, and then you realize you would have to take the warning just to get your +1 draw from Earthline, which is probably something you do because you don't expect to get another warning if you like pay attention from now on.
Savjz, have you like weighed in at all on these conversations? I don't know if you've played like a lot of Magic and paper, but it's definitely a theme over there.
So I saw a bunch of stuff on like Twitter where people are like talking about like the I'm staying out of it. I'm just like, I think you nailed it, Brendan, when you said that, like, just call the charge, let them sort it out. That's kind of what I think. I haven't played that many paper events, but if there's anything that happens where it's like kind of like unclear or something, like, I just calling a charge. That's probably the way to go. And like, if there's any kind of disagreement, like, I would think that if I saw something is wrong, one, I say it to my opponent immediately, and then like, if there's any kind of like even a hint of disagreement there or anything unclear, just like call somebody and explain the situation. That's just like straight up. Don't wait for anything.
Did you have any judge calls at all during the online event by any chance? I asked this question because I did see your name and I'm curious to know what happened.
I had three. Oh my god, there's so much drama here. I don't know if this like, I can talk about it so much. So like, there was like everything like. My game one was like, my opponent was playing extremely slow, and like, so this was not a judge call, but it was like, my opponent was playing really slow, and there was a situation, for example, on board where like, he played a Maui, and he didn't have anything to attack into, but he just didn't end the turn, so it was like, whole minute. I think he had like Cusco that was like, he could quest or not quest with, and that was the only decision, like, out of everything that could happen was like, does he quest with the Cusco? And it was like, 2 minutes or something, and after game one, like when the game 2 had like started, we only had 10 minutes at the round. Like the first game was like 35 minutes, and I will admit that it was a really long and like hard game, and I probably spent a good amount of time myself in the game 1. But like in the game 2, I started like, kind of like sweating a little bit. So that was the first one. We did not call it charge, but if it was like a live event, that's probably something that I would have done, and like even online, like I don't know. But the game 1 was just so ridiculously long. But anyway, and the second one was I always like, I don't want to get into this, but essentially, like, my opponent forgot, like, who went first and stuff. It was like, that's how it started. It was like, who went first game 1? And then, like, we had this, like, interaction, like, we talked on the chat thing. That was just like, I was like, I think you went first game 1, but I will check from the VOD. I checked from a VOD. I'm like, yes, I checked. You went first game 1, and I go first game 2. And then he says, okay. And then we start the game, and I'm going first, as I should. And then he's like, and then my opponent is like, hold on, wait, like, who's going first? Like, he already like okayed the thing, and then like, so the judge was like golden. Then it takes like 7 minutes, and like the first judge call is like, okay, well, like you're gonna keep playing from here, and then because I'm obviously streaming, and like I'm on this like really long delay. That has now passed. So if he want to see my heart starting, and he could, and then like, this is not like. There's nothing unclear. Like I was really unhappy about it because we had like clear communication in text where he acknowledges that I'm going first, and then it's like it's kind of like, it's such a weird situation, but I was really unhappy with that because considering the stream delay, and then it was like, okay, well, should we restart the game? And then we kind of like restarted the game, and at the end of the it's like long story short, but like at the end of the day, they ended up like they hadn't seen like the exact chat, I believe, and the judges checked the chat, and they had the timestamps on it, like what happened before the match started, what happened like afterwards, and they saw that like he clearly knows, like, or knew, and it was just like it was really like confusing, and I still to this day I don't know what happened, like it's like exactly, but it's just like after the mulligans, he's just like, we already agreed that I'm going first, I go first, and then after mulligan, he's like, wait, who's going first? It's just like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm going to be interested in is I've heard 1 or 2 stories, but again, we are going a bit of a tangent here, but I do think it's important because like as the championships come out, and especially these Lorcana challenges, like situations like this will come up, and it's important to understand what to do in them. But I had a few stories of when we were at the Poland 10K, the head judge was like, he was at a finals. I think this was for like WoW TCG back in the day, and someone basically claimed that they couldn't speak English, that like they couldn't understand what their opponent was saying and stuff like that. But earlier on in one of the games, it's clear that he spoke English to someone else and stuff like that. So there's so many ways that people try to abuse the system and get around these types of things. So the main takeaway from this is just be wary, and like Brendan, Savjz, and all of us were saying, just call a judge. The judge should handle it. I'm on the extreme end.
Like I'm not like judge calling to try to get advantages, but if anybody asks me fucking anything, even if it's the most obvious rule in the game, I just say ask a judge. Don't ask me, because if they ask you and you give them a response, like you're just you're liable. You're liable for that information. And something that happens to me a lot in Flesh and Blood, or at least it used to, is like I would be walking around tables or standing by a table, and somebody that was playing a game would ask me a question. I'm like, no, not me. Don't ask me. I'm not the guy. Don't ask me. First, I don't understand the rules. Second, I'm not a judge, and I can get in trouble for this. But yeah, I just like, especially when people ask you for things that make you feel uncomfortable, like in a, they ask you for a take back or something, or they did something wrong. Like I just say, call it, ask a judge. Don't ask me. Ask a judge. That's how I go.
For the tournament on the weekend, I think it happened 4 times in a row to me, where my opponent, after game 1, they asked, "Oh, who went first game 1?" I was like, Can someone please remember it? It's why do I have to be the one to tell you? Yes, you did go first game 1 every round.
Yeah, I was watching. I don't know if it's you or Moyen, but one of you was like, that was happening to them every round, and then like the last round, like one of you forgot, and you're like, oh shit, now I'm the guy that forgot.
No, yeah, that was me. But then I checked the VOD. I didn't.
Yeah.
Taking a VOD is such an easy thing to do, but like, oh man, I can only imagine the situations where it's like neither player is recording, and then it's like nobody remembers, and both are claiming that like they're going first or something. That sounds pretty awful, honestly.
All right. Next one's from Chaos Envy. Is leaving a dice on top of your deck considered note taking? Some other games, it is considered note taking and is not legal. I mean, we have the full rules for Lorcana, but it's an interesting one. I actually don't know the answer to this question.
I love that. We have the full rules for Lorcana, but none of us have read them yet. So this Savjz, just for reference, this is in reference to, like, let's say you have a location on the battlefield, you have a draw trigger on something like Queen's Castle. It's standard practice in Magic. I'm sure you've seen it on coverage or in paper when you played events. Basically, you can put a dice on top of your deck. It doesn't denote any specific kind of note, but it's used as a reminder for when you go to draw for turn that you have another draw trigger / location gain trigger, something like that. Are you aware if that is considered note taking or not?
I would imagine that it's not, but I don't know any better than you guys. Like, your guess is as good as mine. But it's just like, it seems like such a harmless thing to do. Like, it's just all we're doing here is just trying to like keep the game, like flowing as intended. So I don't know if it's note taking or not, but I sure hope that it's allowed to do if someone wants to do that.
Yeah. Also on the weekend, I rewatched the Candios one, and they were like taking a screenshot when seeing opponent's hand, which is note taking, but like I think in online events it's completely fine because
it has to be.
Yeah,
there's no way to monitor it. Like,
yeah, it's the same thing in Hearthstone. In offline events, there was no trackers allowed, but in online events, of course, they're allowed, because if you don't allow them, people are still going to do it, and you will not find out. So it's better to allow it, to not give a disadvantage to the honest player.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Next one's from Ichigo. In the 2-game system, do you think it's better to go first game 1 when your opponent doesn't know your deck, or game 2 when you know your opponent's deck and can make more informed mulligan decisions? It's a great question. Pass that over to you, Moyen.
I think it depends on the type of deck you're playing, because basically with going to 0 being incentivized so much, I think you want to focus on winning the game you're going second, on increasing the chances of winning the game you're going second. And let's say you focus on the game you go second, and you're like an aggro deck that gets a lot more equity out of the opponent not knowing your deck and maybe mismulliganing, then I would want to go game second, would want to go second in the first game, have the extra equity of them not knowing my deck, and then second game I go first and also have a decent chance. If I'm playing like a deck, a slower deck where it's the other way around, I would probably want to go first game 1, because I don't think the tiebreaker matters as much.
Savjz, any thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm always going first. Like, I'm going, no matter what deck I'm playing, I'm always going to go first, because I think this 2-game format is so important to because you want to win both games, right? It's really important to win both of the games. And if I'm going first game, I don't know how to mulligan, and I'm going second, I feel like that gives me kind of like the least chances of taking the game 1. So in the second game, so it's either like I'm going first or I know how to mulligan. That's one of those things, because I've played a lot on Pixelborn. I feel like I'm like capable of adjusting my mulliganing like pretty carefully based on like what I'm playing against, like all the songs gone against like green decks, and keeping New World in many matchups. Like in particular, just do I keep a New World or not? Because like I think a lot of people, from what I've seen, the way it's played, is kind of like they don't realize how often they should keep it. But it totally depends on the matchup. So not just that, but also just something like, like if you're playing one jump ahead, like you don't, like you're going first. Going first lets you always be able to, that if you're going first, you will be able to cast the one jump ahead on turn 2, because your opponent can't discard it from you with Green Ursula or Bare Necessities. So I think that's also like really like a huge deal. Yeah, I'm going first every time.
Yeah,
But
it's really interesting. Sorry, Moin. I was just going to add, like, this is a very minor point, but it is maybe important to note in the like super high tier competitive events that the more game 2s you win as well, it's actually better for your tiebreakers. But I don't think that players should take that into consideration. It is interesting to know as you get closer to maybe like knowing, are my tiebreakers that important? That I mean, it's always important to win every game, but maybe it's even more important towards the end to really try and win your game 2s. But I just want to echo what Savjz was saying. Like, there's something super interesting that even I noticed in, like, I was playing Emerald Steel mirror matches today, and even against Amber Steel, being able to be on the play when you're playing something like, especially the legendary Ursula Singer that can double sing songs. It's like, if you're not on the play, then your opponent Amber Steel can Strength Raging Fire you first. They can Pinocchio you. They can do so much to interrupt that card, and like that's just a prime example of like what being on the play means, is the advantage you get out of playing it, because that's like your sort of protection before they can kind of answer it and stuff like that. So like it's super interesting.
I just wanted to add that I think, Savjz, the reason you're saying that you always go first game 1 is like because you don't play the decks that would benefit from the other way around, because there's the other side of decks that would benefit more from your opponent miss-mulliganing and have a very strict, rigid mulligan where they would actually want to go second first game and get that advantage there.
That's a fair point. Like, there might be some decks where it's kind of like it doesn't matter as much to you. Like,
yeah,
like
one deck, let's say Emerald Amethyst, and you still have a very similar mulligan, but your opponent might not be mulliganing for the Murfolk on 1 opener because they don't know.
Okay, like I can see that. I can see that be a thing in some cases, but yeah, like if this is if someone decides to, based on this though, like if you're in a real situation, if someone is like wins the dial and I'm like, okay, I'm going second, it's like, wait a minute, do you actually get like information out of that as well? But it is interesting to think about. But with the decks that I personally play, I definitely do prefer to go first.
If you're playing good decks, you go first game 1.
Yeah.
Fair. All right, next one's from TCG Secretly. What do you guys think about Green Purple Bounce? It's the deck I love the most and wanted your guys' thoughts. It's an interesting one because it's actually not included in any of our tier 1/tier 1.5 slots there. But I also do think it's a decent list, but I don't think it's as good as people think, because at the very week 0, or maybe it was week 1 of the set 3 meta, like I think that won like the first major event, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this deck's absolutely insane" and stuff. But I just think that Emerald's gotten such a bump. I think the best Emerald deck at the moment by far is Emerald Steel. I think I'd play Emerald Steel over Emerald Amethyst all the time. Now that's just me personally, because I like the fact that Emerald Steel can utilize the Ursula to kind of remove threats, but then also has the ability to be a little bit aggressive if you're playing the lower to the ground version. But I will say that the Emerald Amethyst deck is super fun and super wacky. You can do crazy things with it. I mean, we saw one, I think it made top 16 at the Poland event, that was playing like Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo and the Singer Ursula and Lucifer, and you can potentially discard 6 cards from your opponent's hand. Kind of crazy stuff like that. But as Brendan would say, that does very much seem like Magical Christmas Land. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's not a bad deck if you're super comfortable playing it. I'm sure you can do well with it, as many people have. But yeah, my stance is that it's, I don't want to say overrated, but it doesn't like stand out to me as one of the best decks. What do you think, Savjz?
So I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. So I think it's a pretty solid deck, but I agree that it's I wouldn't consider it like a tier 1 deck right now. But we have it sleeved actually, and it's like one of the decks that I have like all in paper, and I think my wife Christina is going to be playing it at the set championships this weekend. And I've begun like coaching her on like how to play it, because I think it's one of the more effective, like sort of straightforward. Like she hasn't played it. She's very good, but she hasn't like played as much. She hasn't played as much as I have. So like I'm kind of like coaching her to like just like, okay, like if you have like go Merfolk into Flute Rider, you can like Smork you know, like it's a word from Hearthstone where you're like, so you play like this aggressive playstyle to like 14 lore, and then you like the version that I have right now that I think that I would recommend her to play. It has spell books as well, because I don't think there's gonna be as many Benjas, maybe not at the locals, but so like you aggressively like quest to 14, and then you switch into the goat, bounce goat, and spellbook strategy to kind of like finish it off. It's like a really like aggressively to 14, and then finish with goats and books. And it's like I think it's a really like streamlined, effective deck, and I think it's it can be quite powerful, but I don't think it's tier 1, but it definitely works. It's a good deck.
I also think that the deck's not completely figured out yet, because I think lots of top players realize that it's not tier 1. It's like slightly behind that. So there's like less work being put into it. I think the deck could potentially also work with like Prince John for the Ursula Sudden Chill, just like Emerald Steel tries to do it, if you build it a little bit differently. And I think that's not totally explored. And at the same time, I played Red Purple on the weekend, and I think Emerald Amethyst is one of, if not the worst matchup for Red Purple. I think that the deck's like, it is not, I don't think it's tier 1, but I think it's incredible against Red Purple. It's just does very similar things, but it's like the tiny bit more aggressive, and then Red Purple doesn't really get to stop the late game of Green Purple, where they also play goats and books and just flood the board with 1 to 2 lore characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where I am. I just kind of think it's like a tier 2 deck right now, but also there could be some deck building constraints there. Like I don't think that the Bippity Boppity Boo bosses on a roll, like those cards are particularly good. I think they can do powerful things, but I think that when they do that powerful thing, it's more of an outlier than kind of like something.
I'm not a fan of the Bippity Boppity. Like I think it's too janky. Like it can work. Yeah, there's like the situation where it can be good, but it's just like, if I remember right, it's like uninkable, and it just doesn't. It's too situational. Like I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the last comment is from Moostermind. This is from Discord. What are you guys expecting to see in the store championships this week? After Ruby Sapphire winning the Pack 10k event, I'm expecting to see either lots of Ruby Sapphire net decks or lots of aggro, Emerald, Amethyst, etc. to try and counter it. For me personally, I get this question is very just like, well, what decks do you kind of see at your local meta? But it is interesting if people are going to a set championship and they haven't really played at the locals before. For me, I think most people will be on Amber Steel, because a lot of people love Amber Steel at my locals. I think a few will be on Ruby Amethyst, because very similar to Brennan, it's like the one deck they've played for the entirety of Lorcana, and they do not switch off it. But then I also think there's going to be a lot of Ruby Sapphire. So I would say, for me, I would say lots of Amber Steel, decent amount of Ruby Amethyst, and then after people seeing this Ruby Sapphire list, I'd say there's no doubt that there will be quite a few as well. I've had a lot of people ask, like, oh, is the meta call just bring an aggro deck and stomp everyone? I'm like, no. I don't think that's the call.
No, that's steel. Yeah. Steel. That's a lot of steel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. What about you guys? Is it a similar type of thing, or something a little bit different?
So I just want to say that people will bring aggro decks. Like that is something that's going to happen at your store championships. That will not happen, or it will be very unlikely, or much less likely in something like a pack tournament. That doesn't mean that, I don't think that aggro's actually a good pick. All it means is if you pick something like red-blue, I think there's a legitimate threat of falling into the loser's metagame and just getting wrecked by aggro soup, for what it's worth.
For me, I just want to say that, like, for anyone that does bring aggro, I feel like there's the two types of people that bring aggro. There's people that bring aggro that say, like, oh, it's like the easy deck to play, I'll just probably smoke everyone. And then there's also because for me, if you're bringing aggro, it's more of like you're really trying to do a meta call. And with how much steel is running around, it's going to be hard. So I'm going to say, if you do bring aggro, some of you, I think you've kind of got balls to bring aggro, because it's not going to be easy, is all I'll say. It is not going to be as easy as you think bringing that deck.
I wanted to add to that a little bit that I also think that there's at least some extent on the deck prices and the cards, like it's something like you can't just, if the question was like because of last week and now we're gonna see a lot of Ruby Sapphire, like it's not that easy to just whip up all the cards in 1 week if you're missing like 4 Maleficent and 4 Be Prepared. Like the Maleficent prices are now like $45 each or something. So like I think that kind of like a little bit circling back to that green purple, I think if you don't play the 3-mana Ursulas, that deck is like highly effective at like $60 or $40. Like if you got the Queen's Castles as well. If you have no Queen's Castle, if you have no 3-mana Ursula, it's like $40 deck that's like pretty viable. So if you're a more casual player, or you play like multiple card games, and you just like kind of like play a little bit less Lorcana, like maybe your main game is like Star Wars or whatever, and then it's just like, but there's this big event coming for Lorcana, and it's just like you don't want to spend 400. Like, I think some of the acro decks can be like pretty appealing if you're a more casual player, you still wanna like participate.
There's definitely some really good budget-friendly decks, and I do think that's a bit of it's a good point you make, but I do think it's a little bit of a separate conversation because it's a very good deck if you're on a budget and you're in that range, but if people are looking for like the best deck, it is like these set cards. But yeah, like there's another deck, like if someone asked me like, I'm on a budget, what deck should I bring? I would actually recommend Emerald Amethyst, but also take a look at, I think Zach Bivens brought like a really cheap deck to the 8K that happened in Atlanta, and it was just like a very tempo orientated Steel Amethyst deck, and decks like that as well, I guess, was not too expensive, and they can just perform pretty well. So there are decks like that you don't have to spend an egregious amount of money, but I do think those are definitely separate questions as well.
My budget recommendation is actually Ruby Amethyst. Like, I think it's quite budget friendly, especially like there's even some lists that cut even more top end out, like they play like 2B prepared, like Maui was playing 2B prepared. Like, I think if your Ruby Amethyst deck just consists of the lower curve, like from what I understand, it's a really cheap deck.
It's not as expensive as it was by far, yeah. And I think maybe not everyone, but most people seem to be cutting the Maleficence because they do seem a little bit unnecessary, and that cuts a huge price point off the deck for sure.
Even if people aren't, you can cut them. They're not that important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think that when we get into the budget talk, I think it's always like, what budget deck to play? I think there's a lot of options, but it always starts with Amethyst, because I think the Amethyst core is like very basic. Like, yeah, like Madame Mim Fox. Like, name an expensive Amethyst card that's must have. Like, the most expensive Amethyst card is like $5.
It's like, Fox, which is crazy.
There's like no good legendary cards at Amethyst. So you can play Amethyst like Amethyst Emerald. You can play like Amethyst Ruby, and like got the high end, like Brenda mentioned. I think that's a good way to do it. It's just like, but Amethyst is what you want to be playing if you're on a budget.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
And Elsa from last set.
Yeah, there hasn't been any good legendaries literally since set 1 in Amethyst, and it's been those two.
Jafar,
the rest have been
Jafar New World. Oh my god, we're going to the moon. Like $60, like the catch card, and now it's like $9. It started at 25 or 30, and now it's like $9.
I think the whole archetype is just wildly different as well. Like, yes, it is still a controlling deck with a lot of controlling elements, but it is very much a do combat tempo deck, like trying to fight for board, which is
it's built upon the Mim package, I think, for sure. Yeah, like since set 2, I think set 2 really changed what Amethyst was in terms of like it's still a very attrition based color, as in you get a lot of card draw and stuff, but the tempo-iness that I gained in set 2 was absolutely incredible. So yeah, but that's the end of the Spilled Ink section. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just because of the Jafar, shout out to everyone hating on the game designers just because they printed Jafar Whole New World, and now it's not even a tier 2 deck. It's like probably still below that.
I cannot wait. I love when we get like reveal season, because we see all these cards. It was like, Brendan, you remember Bell in set 2? Everyone's like, oh my god, this card's gonna break the game.
To be fair, you know what card I said wasn't good? And I'm definitely eating shit on that one. I said Lucky. I said Lucky Dime.
We all said Lucky Dime. We all said Lucky Dime was bad. I said Lucky Dime was bad.
Looked like it was more kind of magical Christmas and like a Timmy thing that you're gonna try to do, and like you get your Lucky Dime out. But yeah, that card's really fucking good. Like, oof, that card is so good.
Lucky Dime. I love the Lucky Dime. I was just thinking about, I was joking with my wife about this. I kind of like, because some people collect, like a particular card and they have a bunch of things. So I was thinking about getting like a binder and just getting it full of Lucky Dimes, and then like just before the tournament, you like pick one, and if you don't do well, you put it back and you print one for the next tournament.
That's
but it's just like, I'm not superstitious, but I just thought it was kind of a mildly.
It's a special foil Lucky Dime that's to be experienced to all of the tournaments.
So
honestly,
at Pro Tour number 1 for Flesh and Blood, we all brought this. Like my team brought this deck called Kano. It was a combo deck. It had never been played like that before, so it was very innovative. And there was like a weapon he had, and like you could have like the foil nice version, and then there was like a whiteboarder version, which is like, it's like, people don't like the whiteboarders, so whoever had the most losing record had to use that, and now I have it permanently because I did the worst at the Pro Tour, so my weapon is permanently like the whiteboarded Crucible. Basically,
honestly, Lucky Dime might have become my favorite card because it performed like incredibly in the Poland tournament. where there was one game where I was playing Sapphire Steel against Ruby Amethyst, and they had 2-turn lethal from hand, no matter what I do. Just with gold bounce into play gold again.
Oh, this was against Keen, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was against Keen.
You crushed his streams, bro. My god.
And then on my turn, I barely get to 13 ink, and I'm on 5 lore, and I get the just the bell dime, hit the bell. This needs to survive, or I lose over 2 turns. And they like barely don't get there over 1 turn to 20 as Ruby Amethyst. And they don't find removal for the bell. It hits again for 10 for like exactly 5 lore to 20 lore.
It was like 15 lore again, wasn't it? It was crazy.
Yeah, and I had empty board at the start of the turn. It was the only way to win that game. That was incredible.
Yep. That sounds about right. Yeah, like I was gonna say, if you want to get your question read out, you can choose to come on next week. You choose to come on YouTube, or you can go to the Discord and we have a specific channel for that. So the main topic is, so what is the best deck? Really? So I have it broken down. I wrote these notes, so I'm going to make my case for these decks, and I'm going to talk about the positive and negatives. I wrote some short lists on positive and negatives, and I want you guys to expand on it or disagree with it. First, we're going to hit it from the top, macro. So my tier 1 and tier 1.5 decks. Tier 1 is blue steel, red blue, amber steel. Tier 1.5 is red purple and green steel. For me, those are the decks I'm looking at for the store championships. There's other decks that are viable. I would probably just put them in tier 2, but they could still absolutely take down a store championship. But I just want to hit it from the top here. Do you guys agree or disagree with that list?
Yeah, I like it a lot.
I agree with it, yeah.
All right.
I also agree with it, but there's also this slight like nuances. I don't know if we'll talk about this a little later, but like I think blue steel is probably the best like well-rounded deck for in the game. But when it comes to like best of 2, that's also a little different. Like feel like when I played blue steel in the first like the 2-game format event, I got a lot of ties. Like nobody 2-0'd me, but it's just like it's like really well-rounded and it's consistent, but it's like if we talk about like high roll potential, like amber steel with the shifting and new welding, it's just like it's a little more. Although there's more Robin Hood in the blue steel right now, but I kind of feel like that's a good, like it's hard to say which one is the best, but I do agree with like I would probably, if I had to pick one, I think blue steel is maybe like slightly the best.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So that's a great point you make, because I mean the TIA tournament was the first time I experienced the 2-game format, and my whole thought process was I just played an aggro deck to truly test, like, if you bring a polarizing deck to this type of format, how rewarded will you get? Will you do a lot of 2-0s? Will there be a lot of 1-1s and stuff? So it was really interesting to see. My takeaway was that it was just very reminiscent of just still bringing aggro to any major tournament. It's like, if you hit the red-blue, you win. If you hit the steel, you lose. That was pretty much exactly what it was like. But yeah, it's just going to be interesting, because as far as I'm aware, I would say that 90% of the store championships will be best of 3, because that's what the standard has kind of been. But I know Ravensburger have said that it is up to the store if they want to do 2-game format, and I think it's very important that if any of the stores do a 2-game format, that they actually let the players know before, because that, as you mentioned, could actually possibly change the deck choice. But then as we move into like the Lorcana challenge, it's going to be interesting, because primarily you want a deck that performs really well in the 2-game format, but then if you do make it to the top cut, you also want it to do good in best of 3, right? So it's a super interesting point.
I think timed best of 3 rounds in paper are a stretch. I think it's really hard to finish games with if you're playing these top 3 decks. Amber Steel being on the faster end of that, but it's just really tough to finish games in 50 minutes if you go to 3 games. Like, if you're playing red purple or red blue, like, it feels basically hopeless. I think if you win game 1, you're in game 2. Like, oftentimes, like, I've done it multiple times to a successful result. Is I've just conceded early when I still had a really good chance in the game, but I was just like, I just have to, like, if I lose this game, there's no way we're finishing, and I might as well just go on the play and just try to win here. But yeah, I'm going to make my case for positive and negatives of each of these tier 1 and tier 1.5 decks. I'm going to start out with blue steel. I've positives: strong versus aggro, fundamentally powerful game plan, multiple angles of attack, strong utilization of a busted card, a whole new world, strong draw engine via Flaversham, and the 1-cost items, the popsicles. My weaknesses is that it's weak to red-blue. I think it's fundamentally weak to red-blue. Like, very, very hard to beat red-blue, especially on the draw. I also think that in terms of decks, Maybe Amber Steel kind of competes with it on this end, but I do think that this is by far the most challenging deck to play. And it's like, it's a bit innocuous as well, because I think that a lot of the challenging decisions you're making are actually based off what you ink. So it's not immediately clear on how to optimize your gameplay with the deck. I think it's very easy to make extremely punishing mistakes, especially when it comes to inking with this deck. Passing over to you guys.
So I agree that it's pretty tough to play. I think that but the most basic thing about it is usually is like the kind of like what every game is like. What the goal is that like you ramp, you dump your hand, and you new world quickly like one time. But then like I think like past that point is where like it gets a little like trickier. Like you really need to know what you're doing. What are you playing against? Like the decision to like how the second new world is like being able to kind of like evaluate like what does it do for your opponent is pretty tough at times. It's just like Cogsworth, like do you sing something with Cogsworth, or do you like keep it safe, and do you quest with Cogsworth? Like there's a bunch of like kind of like interesting decisions there. It might not be obvious always.
I think it's really tough against certain matchups, particularly against Amber Steel. It can be extremely difficult because Amber Steel has access to Bare Necessities, which can target multiple big cards, not just songs. So it can get rid of the whole new world. If it's played early, you can get rid of the quill, and disrupting your ramp engine is like so detrimental to the deck. I think if you lose your ramp engine, your only saving grace is if you can find your ramp engine then through Flaversham, if you've done the popsicle and stuff like that. Like that's kind of your way back into it. And also really interesting, like you mentioned, Savjz, was if you're against an Emerald deck, do you keep the whole new world or do you not? Because like traditionally in most of my matchups, I'm like, okay, if I have like my ramp, I have Cogsworth, I have Wheel, happy to kind of keep those as long as I can pull that off. I'm pretty much winning the game. But once you lose your song, it can be really, really tough. I personally think, I do want to get your guys' opinions on this, but I think it's probably a strong opinion for most Blue Steel players. I do think Cogsworth is the best card to sing Whole New World in that deck because of the ward that it has, because of the protection. I've had instances where I've ramped to 6, I've done Gaston, to kind of search through the cards, and Gaston's died to multiple different things, died to Zeus, died to Bounce, Pinocchio, Madame Mim, like it's died to some crazy things like that. So I do think Cogsworth is the best singer for the whole new world, but I also agree that it's sometimes difficult to know exactly when you want to sing that song, because if you hold for a turn and then they get an Ursula and then it's gone, then your game plan's out the window, right? So it's
I think like the whole Gaston thing is also you're playing the whole new worlds, but you're also drawing your card on top of that. So like I think that fundamentally a whole new world is all about card advantage / card disadvantage. Not valuing your opponent on the wheel, and you're able to do that consistently because you're ramping, right? You're ramping, you're dumping your hand faster than your opponent, you're wheeling, and you're getting more card advantage. For me, the most compelling thing about Blue Steel is obviously it's steel, so it has a very, very good sort of way to interact with board, but also like it is just so compelling that a deck has the strongest card advantage card of the game, which is a whole new world. It also has the strongest draw package in the game, which is Flaversham, and then on top of that, if you play it, you have access to Beast. So you have like access to so many different angles to which to take the game long and actually draw more cards and get more value than your opponent. For me, it's just such a compelling deck where it kind of like eat shit is just like against like red blue. I just think red blue is just such a hard matchup. It just counters you in so many different ways. It is winnable, but it's really, really tough.
If red blue didn't exist, this was the strongest deck in the game. I think Cogsworth isn't necessarily the best singer, it's just like the safest singer. If you get it off.
That's probably more correct, yeah.
Yeah, Gaston, I think are even better to sing their songs with. And then I think there's also a bunch of nuance with this deck in when how much early lore you can get in and like how much you have to play around the punishes. And then I think generally people tend to be too scared to give their opponent cards when they can completely lock out the game if they play aggressively for their whole new world, or even the second whole new world. But even more importantly, I think what we need to talk about, which is I'm probably my favorite reason, or why I'm happy that Savjz is playing Lorcana, is that he gave us like completely new takes on a few builds where people were like already kind of happy and content with. And I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but I tried all of them, and there's a few things that I think were just completely going under the radar. And one of these things we have to talk about in Blue Steel, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're probably the reason why people started experimenting with the Robin Hood shift package more and one jump aheads in Blue Steel.
I'm a big fan of like that version personally. Like I understand that like the Mickey Mouse like curving in the Goxford is actually like that's pretty legit. Like when you have a Goxford to support the Mickey Mouse, like it's like the 1-3 can do more than I initially thought. But I firmly stand behind it. Like I think Robin Hood, I think there's a reason why it's kind of like the best card from the latest set. Like the 6 health on it, or like 6 willpower, whatever. It's just like it's surprisingly tough to deal with. If you don't have a Goxford, it's an excellent singer. Like survives a Zeus. Like that's kind of crazy to me. How it's just having like the shift package. I think it's really powerful. And like now with the bells also, like just the one jump ahead. Like I really feel like I'm not saying that my Blue Steel is like the card for card like the optimal, but I firmly like personally believe that package is kind of like the way to go. It's just like with the ramp like curving out like 2-4 and kind of like that. We have some evidence of this, like the Poland event that was like the 10K, was it? Like I know there was like a chop at top 4, but the deck that won it was actually like my Blue Steel. Like I don't know who the person who won the event was, but like what his like ID online is. But I saw that it was like card for card what I played like a week or 2 weeks before that in the Alice's like the like the TRB's event, and now also like just this last weekend in the biggest tournament ever, the 10K, the runner up deck was like 4 cards different what I have currently. Was also running that, so the track record for like that variant is kind of building, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. So for my testing, because I've played both versions a lot, I still like the other version a little better overall, but I think there's some things that your version does better. So I think what it does better is, first of all, it gives you the shift Robin Hood lines, which play one Zeus. And then, so you have a 5-drop that plays one Zeus later that is a little bit stickier, but also gives you an extra early game curve to hit. That's very strong. And probably one of the biggest things is that you have a ramp 1 turn earlier if you're playing against Ember Steel. So you have 1 more turn where you can fit in the ramp before you get Holy Worlded, which makes that, like both of these things, being better against Zeus and being better against early Holy World, make your version of the deck better against Ember Steel. But I do think at the same time, in a lot of matchups, it does have a few extra weaknesses, which is why currently I still prefer a little bit of a different version, which is you can no longer ramp into the Sad Beast, which is a very strong play against a lot of decks in the other version of the deck. And second of all, I think the deck can be somewhat weak to locations, because the other version often fits in a few Rise of the Titans where you are just on the 4 Zeus. So it is a little bit more susceptible against like Queen's Castle.
Yeah, the Beast thing is one that, because there's like certain matchups where it's like super, super good. Like against, for example, like green decks, and if you ramp into it, because like if they can't like Zeus it, and they discard, or any deck that discards your New World, like I feel really good about playing the Beast. And when we have the Robin Hoods, there's just no space for it, like because we have to always make a choice, like which one do we play. So there's certainly some like compromises that had to be made there. But yeah, it's just like the 1 jump ahead into like, I think this is really important. So I'm not stressed. It's like just like playing like a 4-mana Singer on turn 3, and then like playing 4 copies of Zeus. Like I think 4 copies of Zeus is absolutely core, and it should be core. Like whether your Hiram like 8 an item or not when you played it, I just think that like having your Hiram like sing a Zeus is like a game winning moment oftentimes. So like getting that ramp like from 2 mana to a 4-mana Singer is like pretty big deal in my view.
Yeah, and in general, I think also when we talk about Red Blue, we'll talk about this more, how strong the 1 jump ahead into 4 drop into sing a song line is. It's just, I think in this deck, it's more of a discussion to be had, because this deck also has access to Smee on 2 and then Quill on 3, which is a very different but also very strong curve.
All right, next on the list is still in tier 1, Red Blue. So positives for me, very good versus a whole new world decks. That's kind of, in my opinion, is the main reason you bring it. I think modern Red Blue lists can beat Ruby Amethyst. That's a bit old news, but beforehand it was a very, very bad matchup. Now I think it's a bit closer. Like it's very reasonable. I don't even feel super bad queuing into it. I think that Red Blue often like a downside of Red Blues, it often feels all in on Flaversham. I think if you don't find Flaversham early, it's hard for your initial hand to actually sustain the kind of ramping and disadvantage that you're doing, whether it's through the Fishbone Quill or just multitude of cards. Like I think that you can't really afford to ramp if you don't have that card draw. It can be a little rough. So I think that this deck in particular, finding specifically Flaversham plus the 1-drop is so important because you don't have those additional draw engines via Sad Beast or A Whole New World. So yeah, very important to mulligan for that. Lorcana's mulligan is very powerful, so you do find it a lot, but it's something to consider. I also think his deck is very weak to aggro. I think it's probably the weakest deck to aggro out of all of these top decks. And while I would never that would never stop me from playing the deck at like a major tournament or anything like that. It's just like if I'm going to a local scene and I know that everybody plays aggro or there are a lot of people on budget decks, like they will. It is very, very good against Red Blue, and it's actually a reason for me to potentially not bring it if I know that this specific local metagame has a lot of aggressive decks. Outside of that, for me right now, this is probably my favorite deck. Like I really enjoy playing Red Blue. I also think the list is still being tuned a bit. Like there's some very interesting cards that are being added. One, we'll talk about one in particular, the one that draws the card plus puts one in your inkwell. We've also seen some Heart of Paphides. We've seen lists with Bell, without Bell. I think that the optimal Red Blue list is still being figured out, but for me, this is my favorite deck to play in the game right now, and this is what I'm considering to bring to Store Championships. The only thing that will stop me is card availability, and in the case of card availability, I will be bringing a solid tier 1.5 deck in the form of Ruby Amethyst.
Yeah, another point. I mean, you did mention how powerful it is against the Whole New World decks, but I think this deck particularly dunks on Amber Steel quite well. I know Savjz, I think you said you had a lot of experience in that matchup, and there are ways that you can try to try and make it a little bit more fair. But so, overall, I would say that the Red Blue is definitely favored against that.
So we're kind of like, I know we're kind of like going back to like Amber Steel. I'm going to focus on that one. Maybe we should discuss it earlier, but I think there's two very distinct ways to play Amber Steel and build Amber Steel. There's like the San Saeed school of like like really aggressive, not those cutting out the high end, and then there's like the Decandios, like the more like Lantern Ramp with like greedier cards, and I think that the Lantern Ramp with those greedier cards is like significantly worse because like you have less high roll potential, and I think that like if you Decandio obviously is a really good track record, great player and stuff, and like he was tweeting during the event like how like floor is lava and it's like red blue, and that's like the one matchup he's trying to like dodge and like just like making memes out of it, just gotta dodge the red blue, and that's what knocked him out. Like, and it looked really rough, and it is rough. I don't think that the fast version, like the Zen Saeed, because he was kind of the one who like first like, oh my god, like no Tinkerbells at all, like no one was doing that, like, no Tinkerbells, no beasts, and like no surfers, like. And like it was just like he got those, and then like whoever wants to play like Flute or Pridelands, whatever. But like that version in general that cuts the high end, I think that there's just like way more opportunity to just like flood the board, like out tempo the red blue, and then just like discard the prep, and you just go really wide. You discard the prep, and like I think it's pretty legit. But the slow version, like absolutely, like that is the bad one. Like red blue crushes the slower version.
Yeah, if you suddenly turn it into nearly an aggro-ish deck, if you kind of can flip that switch to be that little bit more aggressive, I think you can kind of put in the work there. But yeah, I'd say it's gotten a little bit closer. But like I know for a fact that set 2, Red Blue versus Amber Steel, it just wasn't close because that was the version that people were playing with the lanterns and with the beasts and stuff like that. So yeah, Moin, any more thoughts about Red Blue?
Yeah, to me, Red Blue is the deck that will always be a risky pick, but it's also the deck that if it does make top cut, it's like has very good chances of winning the entire event. Because if we look at this tier 1 of decks with Blue Steel, Red Blue, Amber Steel, it is the deck that's good against both of the other good decks. It does still have its weaknesses, which makes it a risky pick, and it might not get to top cut, but I think once it gets there, it has a really good chance.
Yeah. The weakness is like, I think I just want to say that like it's very specific, like in my view, what like the biggest weakness is, and specifically it's green decks that go like Cursed Merfolk into the Flute Rider, because like it's like both of the weak spots of the deck are like cascading in those two cards, which is the running out of cards and not being able to like deal with something like an aggressive strategy. So both quest for 2 and both discard a card. Like besides like like Medusa, which happens on like pretty like maybe too late. Like and there's gonna be other stuff at that point too. Like the way to deal with those 2 cards is Queen of Hearts. That's the only thing you can do to them. That's the only thing you can do to them. And even then you discard a card and you get into this like weird spot where it's like, oh, like what am I gonna ink here, or can I even ink anything? And then like, okay, like be prep. Yeah, that's a good card, right? But then there's Green Useless. It's like the discard combination, like the from green, is like such a nightmare to play at times.
Yeah, I think it's an atrocious matchup for blue red. That being said, I think on the play, I do like Queen is good, but what I do value more than anything else is Popsicle, 1 jump ahead, Flaversham on board, ideally Popsicle back up, and then something like a Maui, which just literally contests the board for the entire game. And then you keep that draw engine in the form of the Flaversham, because they're not going to remove it, basically. So like you do have the back, like you just need the end, like a draw engine on basically turn 3, and you're pretty good. That being said, if they go Prince John, sudden, like the Ursula Singer, sudden chill, I mean, it's just like, it's over, right?
But
it's just over.
At the same time, I think the green steel matchups like not actually that bad. I think it's still quite playable. I think green purple is a lot worse, because at least against green steel, it's like they don't gain any lore from out of nowhere, while against green purple they have that aggression and then also some uninteractable lore gain later on. Also, when they go Merfolk into Flynn, that's like already bad news. But if they ever open Merfolk into double Merfolk, then it's very, very tough.
Oh man, that's what a nightmare.
It is absolutely Jover in that case.
Yeah, it's like green has some like pretty good tools, but okay, maybe this is a little out of place. Maybe I should wait for the green still. But like just really quickly, like I feel like green with the discard stuff, because we're talking about the discard stuff. It's like the discard stuff is pretty good. Like you have pretty good cards that like do other things too, and you have powerful discard. But then it's like, and then what? Like the closing out the game after like you pull off some good discards can sometimes like be pretty tough.
Yeah,
like, I feel like this card's missing that you need. Well, maybe they'll print them in the future sets, but right now like there's a reason why green decks are not in tier 1.
Yeah, the issue is you get the discards off and you're like, yes, and then it kind of just comes down to how your opponent top decks. And if they're playing a red-blue deck even that has like really high quality card top decks, you're like, yes, I discarded their hand, and they're just slamming down like Medusas, Tamatoas, and they can get there. So yeah, like it's really, really interesting. Before we move on to the Amber Steel Moin, I do want to try to come back to the card we were talking about. Oh my god, I can't remember what it's called. Oh, How Far I'll Go. Right, that's an interesting card in red blue.
So again, this is a card I only tested because Savjz said it's good. So I thought I'd at least have to give it a shot. And I think you were playing it as a four copies, and I don't think it's necessarily that. But I've been testing it at 2 and 3 copies, and I think it definitely deserves a spot even as an uninkable song. Like the cost of playing it is high, but just every time you like 1 jump. So I think this deck doesn't quill as often as maybe Blue Steel. It actually has a lot of games where it is better not quilling, because you 1 jump ahead on 2, then you have 4 ink on 3, and sometimes you cannot afford to take another turn of ramping, but you already have to play a character, and then you play a character on 4, either the Grammatala or the Flaversham, and then on the following turn you can just play Maui, but also sing How Far I Go, which helps you ink without losing cards,
which is huge.
Filters of the cards, and that's huge. And at the same time, this deck has very high cost bodies that don't do much once they're on the board. Sometimes it has the Grammatala, which doesn't do much, but it also has the Maui and the Medusa. Maui not questing at all. Sometimes your opponent doesn't even exert their character because they don't want the Maui trade to happen. And that's really where the How Far I Go shines. So it's not even a terrible draw late. Even like at 8-9 ink, if you have any shitter character on the board, you can still just sing How Far I Go, get another ink for free. I mean, almost for free, filter out the card. And so even mid to late game, it's like completely fine card.
Yeah, I think that like I tried it very early on. It was like one of the things when I would say that I wasn't very good at the game yet, and I just like that card just like it kind of like sucked. But then like now that I gave it another go with a version that has 4 Gramatalas in particular, it's just like the consistency of like having the Grammatala. It's again like, well, it doesn't have anything to do. It's just like, and if you play a turn 3 Grammatala and then you sing it out, or with the high Ramo stuff, I think it's really powerful card. And And another interesting thing I think to talk about is like the oftentimes it's like not just zero mana like draw two, like it's kind of like better than draw two in most situations. Like maybe not as a top deck in like a really long game where you would rather keep both cards, but it's just like zero mana draw two, that would be pretty good. But like zero mana draw one, which you get to choose, and then ink one, it's just like it can really like set the tone. And if you're playing like Scar and all that, like you can play a Scar on turn 5, like thanks to that without a quill. If you're like one charm, but then you play 4th drop, any 4th drop, then you sing that, and it's just like wow. I agree with you that I'm not like 100% sure if 4 copies is the way to go. There's no real reason why we have to run 4 copies. Like there's no like like it gets better, like because it's uninkable as well, and it's a little bit situational. So there is that for sure.
But I've tested it all day today, and I'm almost sure you want to play a few copies. I'm not sure on the exact amount, but I think you want to play it for sure. Also, another card I really wanted to talk about for Red Blue is Let It Go, which was played 3 times in the Poland winning list, and it was very off-putting for me at first and confused me. I almost didn't want to test it because the reason it's played in Blue Steel is that Blue Steel's lacking heart removal, but Red Blue isn't lacking heart removal at all, so why are we playing it in Red Blue? And then I tested it more and more, and it actually made a lot of sense for similar reasons to why how far I go actually makes sense. Is just the Medusa and the Mauis are incredible at singing the stuff, and just removing something for 0 while you can continue doing like maybe your Krabator, your Dime own game plan, and then also remove something on top of it is very, very, very good.
Yeah.
I don't really have much to add. Like I agree with everything you said, but it's just like I guess the one thing that I want to say is that card might have been a little bit of a sleeper. Like it's just like when I first saw it, I'm just like, no, like they get an ink and like we're ramping them and all that, but it really doesn't matter that often. It's just like it's inkable. If you don't need it, you can ink it, and just like the ease sort of like at which you just like remove anything for 0 mana, like it's pretty damn good. And like my experience was exactly the same as what you described.
All right, last on the list for tier 1 is Amber Steel. So for me, I said it has an aggressive game plan with some strong-ish late game reach. Obviously, it can be built multiple different ways. We've talked about. We've got the Zan build and also the Decandio build. I think this is the best whole New World deck. I mean, it's going to be a toss-up between Blue Steel and this deck for sure, but I think it's probably Amber Steel. It can just do some incredibly unfair things, especially in the aggressive version with the whole New World. Multiple ways to build it, both in the form of aggro and the more mid-rangey version. That being said, even in like those 2 categories, there's more ways to build. You have Flute versus Pride Lands versus Lanterns, things like that. So there's many different versions which you can take. For downsides, I think that this deck is actually relatively challenging to play. My experience, at least with the more aggressive version, is that the mirror has been pretty rough for first play advantage for me, particularly when you talk about Cinderella. So if you have any tips on that, Savjz, I would love. But the turn 1 Cinderella, remove whatever the opponent plays, stop them from shifting, stop them from doing anything, seems pretty rough. I think that this also doesn't have some tools to deal with some problematic cards like Cogsworth. Like I often have a very, very hard time dealing with a Cogsworth on the opponent's board because it has ward, and I don't have any reasonable removal to get rid of it. And I also think that this deck, Moyen added it, but it is weak versus locations.
One final point I want to say is, I don't know if it's a necessarily a disadvantage, but this can happen with a lot of decks with a lot of uninkables, and obviously there's a certain amount that can be run. But I find that Amber Steel in particular, at least for me, is when it does its top end, it does it like insanely well. But when it breaks, I think it breaks hard. Now that could be the same for kind of other lists, but from my experience on Amber Steel, like when it goes bad, it goes very bad. But that's probably gonna happen less than it doing really well.
Yeah, so I played a lot of Amber Steel. I'm like a big Amber Steel enthusiast, but it's a very interesting deck in many ways because like it's like you have that high roll potential, and there's no other deck. Like if I know a matchup, I can look at my starting hand and I know I'm gonna win. Like it's just like I know I'm gonna win. Like I have some kind of fast shift, like maybe Robin Hood into big Robin Hood against like color combination that's like can't remove it or is like super unlikely to remove it. I'm just like, whew, like the high rolls are there, but then on the flip side, it's like if your new one gets discarded, you might be kind of screwed. Like there's just no replacement for it really. Like the way that especially the aggro version with no extra draw from Beast and Surfer Stitches. Like that's the fast version is really all in on the new world. Like it's such a crazy thing. But like overall, my win rate with the deck, like the reason why I played in the last tournament, I was just looking at my blue steel and then like amber steel. Like, I'm like comparing. I was just like amber steel. Like even though it feels like there's like this weakness, like it's just my win rate with amber steel is higher. Like we just like it's above 70 and then like below 70 on the blue steel. But yeah, it's such a like weird deck because it's so all in on the new world. At the same like especially that one, like that version. But I am a big fan. I think that it's just like it's just so powerful when it does what it wants to do.
I think it's a big reason why cards like we're seeing cards like Baboom being played is for how insane Amber Steel can kind of be at the start. So
yeah, and
if you're on the
cannons in blue steel. That's a new thing, by the way. That we didn't
yeah,
talk about.
cannons as well. Yeah, one
Yeah.
So
like I'm
I think
playing
it's
like
really-
2 in my blue steel right now, just mostly for that. Not just for that, also for Merfolks, but like
yes, yeah. I was going to say that's the biggest reason you see cards like cannons and Baboom is for the Amber Steel matchup, but then also to deal with Merfolks and Flames without having the disadvantage of discarding a card. I think it's interesting to see those cards. Well, cannons kind of resurge a little bit, but then also Baboom is like I don't know. It's like a fine card, right? Like when it works, but yeah.
Speaking of fine cards, anecdotally, I was watching somebody stream this past weekend. They were playing Ruby Amethyst, and it looked like they were going to pull ahead. They were gonna take a turn off of a game that they were losing, and then they got "You Have Forgotten Me" and discard.
Here you go. As he walks away.
Yeah, that was just hilarious. Speaking of ways you can build it, but
No, stop. My hand was Rabbit and Mim. I talk to chat. It's like, oh, you know that I managed my hand. I played full for tempo. How you're supposed to do against New World. I only have 2 cards left, but there's infinite cards in these 2 cards. Opponent only has a Cinderella on board. 0 cards left. Bam! You have forgotten me. Discards my entire hand. I draw like 3 bricks in a row. Lose the game. that was something else.
Anyway, Moin, what are your thoughts on Amber Steel? And do you agree with this list?
Yeah, I kind of do. It's like I've not played a lot of Amber Steel myself. Because I personally actually don't enjoy the deck a lot. Because it can feel very swingy in how it draws. Maybe I should give it a little bit more time, but of course I do agree that it is incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that rounds out our tier 1 deck. So again, that's Amber Steel, red, blue steel. Lastly, before I go into tier 1.5, Savjz, do you have any tips for the Amber Steel mirror? Particularly, like, I find that it can be very swingy off of that turn 1 Cinderella, and you're on the draw. Like, what are you going to do? Do you play your Robin Hood? Do you play your Cinderella? It gets removed by Let the Storm Rage on, and you're just, like, infinitely behind, it feels like.
it's pretty tough, but like because I've been playing the Pride Lands version last of late, and I also play Benja, so I've been gaining like pretty good like solid upper hand against anyone who's not played the Pride Lands version. Because the Benja, like whether it's Lantern or it's Flute, like it's just like it's actually like it really helps in the mirror. I think that like one of the things it depends a little bit on the hand, of course, but like if your opponent goes first and they play like small Cinderella, like yeah, like that feels bad, man. That feels bad, but like I think that if you have enough ink and stuff, I've noticed that like if you know your opponent has a singer, like the number one thing is that like kill every like 5 mana singer, like or banish, excuse me. We wouldn't be killing anything in Lorcana. Like it's just like it's a huge focus point in removing your opponent's 5 singers. Like it's that is the number one thing. Do not leave your opponent. Whoever like gets to like untap, like with a 5 singer on board is ahead. Like that's the player who's winning. So that's one thing. And another thing is, I guess I would say that is that like it's oftentimes, especially if you're playing from going second and stuff, it might be better to just risk things. Like your opponent plays turn 1 Cinderella, and you have a Cinderella and you have a Storm Rage on. Like it might just be the right thing to just like risk it. It's gonna feel really bad when their Cinderella deals with your Cinderella. Like they have their Let the Storm Rage on, and like yeah, you're more behind. But it's like if you're going second, I would say that don't spend too much time just imagining like, oh, if they have Gravios or I'm gonna lose here, or if they have a let the Storm Rage on, I'm gonna be behind. Like if you play in a going second, you play in a scared way, and you don't risk your opponent having some cards. I think you're gonna like you just like waiting to lose almost.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Plus-
I had experience like that today playing. It's actually the exact same example that I said earlier. I was against Amber Steel, and I was like, they were on the play, and I had my 3-cost Ursula. They had 2 cards. They could play a third, and they had the 1-drop Cindy. I was like, okay, we're playing my 3-drop Ursula. If they have strength, that's it. I'm done. But I'm like, I have to play it to my out because I'm looking at my hand. I'm looking. I have the strength as well. I'm like, okay, if they don't have it, then I can double sync strength. I'm in the lead. I'm like, this is my out. I have to play it to my outs. This is how I'm going to win the game. If they have it, they have it. If they don't, they don't. They had it. It sucked, but it's better than being scared and just waiting for the inevitable. It feels bad if it's going to happen either way, right?
Also, on top of just playing towards your outs and taking the risk, I think it's also important to note that, let's say Ember Steel Mirror, your opponent drops Cindy on 1. If you don't play a 1-drop, there's a decent chance it's just an extra card in your hand that you keep that will still get Holy Worlded away. But where it's like, you didn't even make them have it. It's just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
And
point.
you didn't gain anything out of it.
And like to let the Storm Rage on, like if you play around it to not let them cast it, then it stays in the hand, and then they're going to use it on something else. Like it's not going to disappear. Like they will get that. They will get that advantage with the Cinderella singing the Storm Rage on. Maybe it happens later, but it's just like, just take your chance when you're going second.
Yeah. All right, on to tier 1.5. First off here, Ruby Amethyst, red purple. Yeah, so for me, positives, I think this is the best all-rounder deck. It's consistent, although middling in terms of matchup spread. I think that it's I mean, I don't know if it's unfavored versus everything, but it's just got close matchups. I think that you can I think this is like very much a moot point, but you probably will hear people make the argument that like you can outplay people on Ruby Amethyst. That should never be a thesis for picking a deck, but to the extent at which you can outplay people, I think that is a deck where if you just play tight and play consistent, like you can just eke out a lot of wins, especially at something that's like less competitive, like a store championship. I don't think that's the thesis you should pick a deck on, but it's something to consider and it's something that you'll hear. I think that this deck is strong versus aggro because it's more of a tempo deck nowadays. Like the Mono Min package, shitloads of 1-drops, like it's totally fine versus aggro. It also has a strong draw engine. So the draw engine nowadays is of course the Merlin Rabbit plus bouncing said Merlin Rabbit. It is strong. It's the most powerful draw engine you can have. Oh, of course, friends on the other side. Most powerful draw engine you can have outside of here in Flaversham. And it is also strong versus locations. That is a contribution from Moyne, and that is very true.
That's true. That is the number one.
That's from me, by the way. Well, hey, Moyne's still logged into my account.
Moyne logged into your account. For negatives, all right. My negatives are it doesn't have many great matchups. I think it can struggle versus a whole new world decks. I think Flaversham plus Tamatoa draw engine is much stronger in the late game. You literally can't do anything about Lucky Dime, so good luck going long versus any Sapphire decks. And that is due to having no access to item removal. So
I have an incredibly hot take on red purple. So first of all, I'm going to say that I don't play that much, so you guys are more experienced and you know better. Like I was obviously like been having some frustration with the Bridelands deck because like you mentioned, like it's very good against locations. So it's been like I'm getting some nightmares from this. But anyway, the hot take. I'm not sure. I think red purple might be one of the decks that suffers the most from the 2-game format.
Sort of explain that. Go deeper.
So like when you go second, like at least for me, like any of the decks that I play, which are those tier 1 decks. Like, it's just like, if I'm going first against red purple, because you can't make up for any mana, you have no ramp for that, and it's just like, on the draw, playing on the draw, like red purple doesn't really like getting the extra card is like less valuable because you can sort of like, you're probably going to curve out pretty well, and like you basically have infinite cards with like rapid bouncing and all that. I just like, whenever I go against like, I think that red purple is like, it's like really like well-rounded, strong deck, and I think it definitely deserves the place where it is right here. It's one of those decks that I think goes like 1-1 a lot more. Like a lot of the, if I was to list like 7 cards or 7 strategies that benefit from 2-game format, which would include cards like discard. I think discard gives you a chance to win going second, unlike many others. Because if you go against New World deck, you go second, you discard the New World. Like they might just like, it doesn't matter who went first, like you might win. And then there's a bunch of other things that are also like mana ramping in blue that are, I think, is like kind of like a break that first player advantage a little bit. I don't think red purple has anything that gives you an advantage when it goes to that format, which is a 2-game format.
So red purple in terms of second advantage. I have to think like is the Pinocchio a sort of go second advantage? Is that part of go second
Could be
advantage?
with, I suppose, if you have like
it's not great,
if you have like Rafiki, but
it's something, right? It's something.
It's just like being on the draw. Just like I feel pretty good at playing against the deck with anything when that deck is going second. Like, yes, I play a lot of ramp, and I feel like if I go first against red purple and I have ramp, it's just like, all right, well then we are at least 2 mana ahead, like immediately. You are 1 jump and 2 going first against it. You are 2 mana ahead. It's just like you start playing a Medusa, so whatever it is, I just like. I don't know, but I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts because I actually don't play it myself that much. This is more like when I say that red purple is bad in 2-game format, it's mostly from like playing against it. So I know you guys played it more, so I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, Moin, yeah, you did it on the weekend, right? You played it in 2-game format.
Yeah, I mean,
did you get ties?
Also, my run wasn't great. I might have lost more than I tied, but that's besides the point. So for me, Ruby Amethyst is that type of deck that has never dropped below like 70% win rate on Pixel 1 for me. And I don't necessarily think it's the strongest if I'm going into a field of highly competent players, but I think it basically deserves the spot because people are not everyone's highly competent, and that it does give you lots of equity of winning. Because basically the biggest upside of the deck is that the deck very barely loses to itself. Like the deck does what it does extremely consistently all the time, and that's often good enough to beat someone that doesn't completely take every edge that they could be taking with their plays. Considering the how bad it is going second, I'm not sure what to say about that, because it's true there's some decks that give you some very specific things to have a chance going second. But this deck also has the chance of going second because the player going first can brick and you will still do efficient stuff every time. And that can be enough to stay in the game if your opponent doesn't draw their very strong hand.
Yeah. I think for red-purple, I actually feel like I lose the least amount of equity between going first and going second. Not playing like whole new world decks, I think it's pretty clear that like going second is much, much, much worse. Even with things like red blue, especially against more aggressive strategies, like going first for a second is very, very important to me. In the Ruby Amethyst, like I feel like because I have this flexibility to both deploy out my hand via all my 1-drops, aggressive amount of mims, but also always have my fallback on my draw package, whether it's Friends on the Other Side or Bouncing Merlin Rabbit, that while it is important, like it is nice to go first, when I go second, it doesn't feel necessary, like as hopeless as it does with some of the. I feel like I lose the least amount of edge compared to the other decks I play. At least that's my personal sort of anecdote with the deck.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go that far, but I feel like that at least there's not a significant difference in, like, I don't think Ruby Amethyst is a deck that can't win going second or is like very bad at winning going second. I think that's not really the case.
That's fair. Maybe like when I think about it more, I think maybe that like kind of like stems from the fact that I play so much new world decks, because those have kind of been the 2 decks. So like it's kind of like whether if I'm playing Amber still, like it was like get the turn 1 Cinderella. It's just like because red blue purple red like or a Ruby Amethyst. It's just like it's one of those decks that it's very clear. Like I know exactly what they can do with 2 mana. I know exactly what they can do with 3 mana, 4 mana. So it's like it's almost like we're looking at my Amber Steel hand. I just like prepare for every outcome if I'm going first and just like stay ahead the whole way. And then just, like the return to hand mechanics that are there for value, and like Rabbit that's there for value and usually a key card. It's just like returning hand is suddenly like you wouldn't want to do it. Like it's like a huge downside that you have to take card back because you just gotta discard it later. So it might just be it might not be the after hearing like how you guys feel about that, like it might just be that like the decks that I play, which are the new world decks, are like particularly effective against the kind of like the infinite value.
Yeah.
And,
go ahead, Moin.
In part, it might just be that the decks you play are incredible going first, why
Yeah,
you think
also
Ruby
that,
Amethyst is
yeah.
bad going second.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not really that, it's just the decks you play.
It
I
could
like
be, yeah.
so,
So
so
I
good
think that's a
players.
good way to look at it.
Yeah. I have a hot take about Ruby Amethyst. I don't think it's that hot, but in my opinion, Ruby Amethyst is actually hard to build. So I think that there's part of the Ruby Amethyst shell that like it literally never moves. Like this is the shell, like you're playing these cards, or it's like that you can switch out these 1-drops for these 1-drops. And that is a decision. But the rest of the cards are super meta dependent. Like how many Medusas do you play? How many trains do you play? Do you play Jim Hawkins? Like, are you actually playing locations versus your blue steel opponent? Are you not? How many books are you playing? Like, are you playing Papa and Maleficent? I think no at this point, but like all of those decisions are extremely meta dependent and extremely impactful. And it's hard to know exactly what version of Ruby Amethyst you should bring on the day.
Yeah, you bring in Scar as well. I've seen Scar as a card that's actually sort of being considered in some Ruby Amethyst decks as well. Mainly because it's another way to you can sing, be prepared then suddenly, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of
prepared is incredible. With
the latest like developments in that deck. I know I mentioned this already, but with the Amber Steel that I've been playing, I mentioned I was struggling with the Ruby Amethyst. It's like so many things that's just like Ruby Amethyst. Like there is a lot of room to deck, and like the 1-drops, for example, like just playing those like 3 health 1-drops, which is seems to be like trending again. Is suddenly we can't kill it. Like when I was a Chernobyl follower, so you could like let the Storm Rage on it and you just deal with it. But now there's like these 3 health thing is, and another thing is like because I like playing Benjas. Like now the books are gone. And like it used to be such a like great moment. Like book was a terrible card against any Benja, and now they're gone. Like and just the cutting the high end also, like the Maleficents, that used to be sort of a thing. I think I saw a lot of decks with 4, and then we saw decks with 2, and now you can even find a lot of decks with 0. And there's just like I feel like the list has been there's so many deck choices that are like viable, and that deck
it's fascinating to me because it's exactly what you said. Like I think the 1/3s and the Teeth and Ambitions package is coming back in again to deal with the similar to the whole kind of Baboom conversation, to deal with the small Cindy, deal with the discard cards, the Chris Merfolk and the Flynn Rider. And every time I talk about Teeth and Ambitions, it's so funny because like I think fundamentally it's a really bad card, but because it's the only damage removal card within Ruby, it's good, right? And it is good in those situations to clear off those pesky threats.
It's so contextually good because you got to think about the cards it's hitting. So if you hit a Merfolk with it, like you're kind of like above 1-for-1 trading, especially if you're on lower ink, because you're going to have to lose a card or discard on top of that. Most likely you're not going to dump your hand. And then also like a super context-based play is like if you Teeth in Ambition, something like a Robin Hood, and the Robin Hood is their only shift target, it's like it's really, really effective. It's you can't really assign a value to it, but it is much more effective than a 1-for-1 trade off a 2/2, because the 2/2 is contextual. The 2/2 is a shift target for a whole new world where they're going to get massive card advantage. So it's like, yeah, I just feel like there's so many tools in Ruby Amethyst, and it's not that one is objectively better than the other. It's like they're just meta dependent, and it's like, how do you build a Ruby Amethyst deck that's prepared for the metagame that's going to show up to your store championship, which might be just fundamentally different than the online metagame, but also it might just be 1 week behind, it might be 2 weeks behind, it might be 3 weeks behind, it might be on par with the current online metagame. It's hard to bring the correct Ruby Amethyst list, I think. I
love that the minis came back. Like I think the minis are super, super good in place of more books. I think having 1 book in the deck personally, I think it's still fair, honestly, because it can be a really effective way of getting you there in the late game, like Moin mentioned, like getting that late game lore. But yeah, it's nice to see the flexibility that the deck brings depending on the meta.
Also, we might be a broken record about this, but it's my absolute favorite deck to coach people on, and also for people to just learn the game on, because it teaches every base fundamental about the game you really need to know. I mean, it doesn't teach you the entire whole new world dynamics, which is like a very specific thing, but it teaches you when to shift game plans, when you are playing aggressive, when you're playing to control the game. It teaches you when to like sacrifice some tempo for value, or the other way around. Like it teaches all of that extremely well, how to be like resource efficient. And I think alone for that reason, I often recommend this deck for players starting out the game. And then after they learn fundamentals playing this deck, they can move on to.
Then you introduce them to how broken Amber Steel can be with a whole new world.
Yeah. All right. Last deck in the tier 1.5 section. And that's where we're closing out, because there are plenty of other viable decks. They're just not on our list. And
you want some noteworthy mentions, Brendan?
Yeah. So the last one here is Green Steel. My positives for Green Steel are strong anti-song package. So, I mean, those Ursulas are extremely effective. I mean, you can snag critical be prepared, critical whole new worlds. Like, it is just very, very powerful. I think this deck can be pretty aggressive, especially with the Merfolks and the Flynn Riders. It does have, if you build it the right way, or you build it in one way, it can have very unfair curves. Like, I think, like, you spoke earlier, Savjz. Like, I open my Amber Steel hand sometimes, I just know I'm just going to win the game. That absolutely happens with Green Steel. You can absolutely have, like, I just straight up win the game with this. And that is in particular the Prince John plus Ursula plus Sudden Chill, where you're drawing extra cards, you're making an opponent discard cards, just insane. And my weaknesses for it are most of these lists are actually really bad into locations, like hilariously bad. I feel like if you drop something as innocuous as a Pride Lands versus a Green Steel, they're just like, what do I do against that?
Pretty good,
yeah. In particular, Queen's Castle is really bad for them as well. If you're playing Amethyst, I think this deck's someone else had this, but it struggles versus whole new world decks and it has a weakness closing out the game.
So Spacey has been doing a lot of Green Steel playing, and I think he did well in some like live event, and he's done well online with it. And he's just like, he thinks that Queen's Castle is like the nastiest card in like that exists in all of Lorcana. Like that is just like the one most broken card, but that's just like speaks to how strong it is. Green Steel is very interesting to me. Like I tried to play it, and I think there's a lot of those like good curves. Like sometimes you get those like just like crazy sudden chill stuff. But yeah, that is like, for me, Green Steel right now. This is just my opinion based on what I know. Like you guys might disagree, but I feel like it's just like a few cards away from being like something really good. It's one of those. It's for some decks. Like I think with Blue Steel, you can pretty comfortably have like a deck of 60 cards that's like really good, and then it's just like, oh man, like you even put up one with more, and you have a 70 cards to choose from that would all be like really good. But just like for Green Steel, I feel like this is like something is missing. I think it's like maybe like a 6-drop that would be some kind of like, you know, like something that gives you immediate value when you play it, or gives you guaranteed value when it leaves the play while also being a threat while on the board. I don't know, maybe that would be it, maybe it would be something else, but it's just like I haven't been able to like get it fully to click. And those top deck games that were mentioned in a little bit earlier on in this podcast, those top deck games are like you discard your opponent's entire hand, but you still can't really know if you're gonna win. Like if you're playing against red blue or something like that, you just they have 6 mana. It's just like anything can happen, or 7 mana, maybe scars from the top. Like the New World decks, it's interesting because my data is way better against, like I have pretty good data against playing New World against Green Steel. I feel like it should be a bad matchup because Ursula discarding New World, but it's one of those like, yeah, like the top decks can't just be that good. And like if you play Blue Steel like Cogsworth, like what do you do to Cogsworth with that Green Steel? It's not there yet for me. Like it's a real deck. It's like an okay deck, but it's just something's missing in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's another build I tried out today in my stream of testing, which was a little bit higher end than there was no Merfolk in this deck. There was no Flynn Riders, so you just had the Robin Hood, Shift Robin Hood, Bucky, which is an interesting card because I know a lot of people are saying that they're not really a fan of Bucky because it's so slow, and the biggest advantage of Emerald right now is it goes so fast with those Merfolks and with those Flynns. I think Bucky is kind of interesting against Amber Steel a little bit because it's another card that they just can't target with their removal stuff, and it basically plays obviously if you play Bucky, it plays like the 4-drop Floodborn Jafars, the 3/4 that, like, I actually think that card's really good. It helps you get more consistent card draw, and an Emerald Steel, I think you can struggle with that. It plays the Beasts, and it's the version that actually did play a whole new world as well, which is like, it's really interesting to me. I think decks like that have a lot of potential, and I know players like Spessy love like messing around with them and testing. Like I faced off against the Blue Steel player today. Literally, I was like, oh, this is gonna be such a hard matchup. The only way I won was obviously I was on the play. I had to be on the play. I did turn 1 Robin Hood, and then I shifted on 3, and I did a whole new world. And on turn 2 as well, I did the Ursula to see their hand. I saw they had a Quill. I got rid of their whole new world, and they also had a Cogsworth. So I was like, if I'm getting rid of your ramp into your really good card, I have a pretty decent shot at winning this. So, but that probably doesn't speak to how good Emerald is. That just, I mean, none of those cards are Emerald I mentioned, right? It's the Robin Hood in Steel shifting into the Robin Hood in Steel into a whole new world, which is also Steel. But it was just interesting.
Honestly, the big TLDR of the entire format is just, in my opinion, I think Moyne said that he didn't necessarily agree with it. It was a bit hyperbolic, but like the game is warped around a whole new world right now. Like I think that you're either doing a whole new world stuff or you have a really fucking good reason to not be doing a whole new world stuff. Like that is just the best card in the game, and it's not close.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I think another. This was like I don't think I brought this up, but another thing that I've thought about is that because people often say that Whole New World is maybe the best card, or like Whole New World is the most likely card to get banned. But this is another one that might be a hot take. But I think the second best card in the game is Fishbone Quill. That's like
Fishbone Quill.
I think that card is just like it's like kind of the perfect counter to like your opponent playing a new world, because you can ink like how you want, and you can ink like the fact that you can activate it the turn you play it, and the fact that you can ink anything, and like just it's like the number one counter to that, but it's also like it's just like the ramp potential and like the power that card gives. It's just like
do
I don't know. Maybe we're getting a little sidetracked here, but I think that's the second best card in the game.
Do you think Fishbone Quill would be an issue if Whole New World didn't exist?
Ooh. Well, that's. I think it would still be really good, but it is like I'm like kind of like going further. I've been playing like past 2 weeks. I pretty much only played New World decks, and I'm just like every blue deck like please don't have Quill, please don't have Quill. I just like I know I'm winning if there's no Quill, but I do think that it's one of those like, especially with like Hiram being what it is. I do think it's like. I think it's ridiculously powerful. It's just like, because you with just that you can play a 6-drop on 4. You don't need anything else. And just like the power to like ink it. The only thing that like if there was no Benja, I think the card would be like or like anything to, especially it's Benja. But if there was no Benja, it's just like that would be like ban list material. Like if they didn't have a item removal like in coming up soon or something.
It's a funny discussion actually. I would like assuming we all agree the Whole New World is the best card of the game, what do you think the second best card in the game is? That's kind of like I think I have kind of a potential like spicy cooked one. Like cooked as in bad.
I personally think Flower Charm is an incredible
for
card.
Sure. It's great, but it's great. It has a lot of context, right? You do need cheap items. Ideally, ones that cantrip. For me, I think the second best card in the game might actually be Cogsworth. I just like I don't.
Yeah, Cogsworth is crazy.
Yeah, why does that card fucking have Ward, dude? It's already so good. Like it literally just cannot be interacted with, and it has like a persistent onboard effect. It's like really, really good. Like it negates so much of what you're
right now. What do we have? We have like Be Prepared. We have Lady Tremaine. Sometimes we have like a 7-cost Cinderella after you sang a song to kill it, and that's kind of it. So. Honestly, some because there was a point where people really complained about Be Prepared. Imagine if Be Prepared doesn't exist, and then the entire meta is just jamming Cogsworth on the board, and then your board not dying anymore.
Yeah, play Amber Steel and see what happens when your opponent plays Cogsworth. You're like, what? What am I gonna do about that? Like what?
Oh man, the blue steel mirrors with the Cogsworth are hilarious, by the way. Or I don't know. It depends how you look at it. It's either hilarious or like the worst thing ever. But it's just like whoever gets the first 2 Cogsworths, like usually wins. It like. It's such a like lock on the whole board in the mirror when you get 2 Cogsworths first. It's just like it's crazy, man. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, speaking about the 4-drop uninkable slot, this is definitely a meme. But if Cogsworth is really an issue, we should play this card. I'm putting it into the chat for.
I can't see the chat, so you gotta read it off for me.
So it's 4-cost uninkable, falling down the rabbit hole action. Each player chooses one of their characters and puts them into their inkwell face down and exerted. So basically a Lady Tremaine, but just on a let it go.
If Lady Tremaine is the answer to Cogsworth, it's like the worst answer ever, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Like it comes out on 6. Cogsworth has to be the only thing on board. It's like, yeah, I just feel like when I look at that character and I look at the design of Cogsworth, I ask myself frequently, why does this card have Ward? And I don't have a compelling answer. For like a balanced card, I don't have a compelling answer. Like it is, I don't think a card should both have Ward and have an onboard effect that's as powerful as giving everything resist 1. It's insane.
I think I'd experiment with this card if this was a song. Sorry, I'm going back to this card. I feel like this is just an action. It's like, oh, I don't know if I could play it for 0, maybe, but
yeah.
The Lady Tremaine effect is super interesting, and I'm curious to see if we'll get similar effects with it in the future, because there's a there's a card in the Star Wars card game called Power of the Dark Side, and it's basically a 3-cost event card or action card that just has Lady Tremaine's effect without a body.
Yeah,
and that's super.
It's
That's
traditionally
super
called in card games called the Edict effect from Magic. But yeah, just sacrifice one thing that's on the board.
Mhm.
I think that if
they
there,
choose. Yeah.
I think if there was, and I think that the one that you showed us is actually heavily overcosted. That's why it's not played. Like I think that if it was going to be in Lorcana, it should be a lot cheaper. But if it's both costing 4, that was what it cost, right? I can't see it. And it puts it in their inkwell. It's just like, yeah, it's kind of it's not good. I don't think. All right, Maui, what do you think is the second best card in the game?
Me?
Yeah,
I'm sticking with Lava Charm. That's crazy good. It's there's no reason that card should have 6 willpower and then like draw 4 cards in a lot of
6.
games.
Yeah.
The 6 is like
4 cards.
wild on that. Like that's actually like such a huge deal. Like it survived Zeus and like 6 health. Wow, like what an incredible singer. Like that card is only gonna get better if there's any 4-mana songs like added that they can sing, because you can both get like, and just the ability like that you can get it when you play it and you can get it when you like you get it multiple
it's like
times.
never bad. Even when you don't have an item, you just plot this
Yeah,
down,
it's
you have
still
a
good.
singer,
Like-
or maybe you draw an item later, it's fine.
Yeah, like it's definite. That's actually a good choice for sure. Like, and then the popsicle synergy is obviously like through the roof. It's absolutely amazing. But even without it, it's strong.
It's so interesting to me, like just looking at other card games and so like how powerful certain cards are. But like for like context really matters. So like, I just think of Hearthstone. I think of a card like Shadow Word Pain. I'm like, imagine a card like Shadow Word Pain existed in Lorcana. I think it would be so good because there are so many cards that you want to be able to.
So that'd be
remove,
like
but,
Medusa effect, basically.
Is it
on a
Medusa?
spell.
basically Medusa effect. Yeah.
What
I
would
think
it
will
cost though?
happen,
Because
like,
you would
it's only a matter of time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what would it cost? That's the
you
really
would
interesting
always
thing
rather
to
have
me.
so there's 2 questions. One, is it a song? 2, how much does it cost? Because you would always theoretically you'd always rather have it on enter the battlefield. You'd rather have the creature, because it leaves behind a 4/4 that's like super relevant. They can also sing. So like is Madame Medusa just a better Shadow Word Pain because you get a 4/4 that can sing? It also costs for 1.
And I don't know, Shadow of Pain in Lorcana would probably cost, I don't know,
3 is a lot.
maybe 4.
3, I think.
I think it
3.
depends. Like, is it Inkapol? Is it song? Like, if it's song, I think it almost have to be like 5, because like,
Yeah,
you can
it has to be very
it's like,
expensive if it's a song. A
If it's a
4-cost
song, I think
would
it'd
be
be fine.
incredible.
Yeah.
But if
I
it's
think
like if it's
4-cost
not a
song.
song, like if it's like I think it would be like maybe like Inkapol 4-mana that sounds kind of expensive.
Inkable's really
If it's
powerful.
uninkable, I think we can do 3 mana.
I think it's
3 mana.
Yeah.
Uninkable.
Uninkable 3 mana, not a
Inkable
song.
maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if a song, at least 5.
What would it be? So it'd probably be red, right? Because it's like an effect that's in the Medusa. That would actually be really helpful for like. Okay, we're getting a look at it.
Yeah,
But
watch,
like,
we're gonna see this card revealed now in the upcoming.
It would help a
upcoming
lot
set.
with the green stuff if it was actually like a, or like blue red if it was a red spell. But that's pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So to recap our list: Tier 1, blue steel, red blue, amber steel. Tier 1.5, red purple, green steel. We're clocking in there. Anyway, like you said, we're a little bit off topic, so I want to give you a chance to shout out where people can find you, what you're up to, Savjz. I know you just started a YouTube channel, so we'll be sure to include that in the link in the description.
So I just started like a day, 2 days before this recording. I started a brand new YouTube channel. Go like if you guys want to check it out, like Savjz Lorcana, brand new channel. I did my 1 live stream so far there, and probably by the time this comes out, there's gonna be at least it's maybe 1 or 2 videos. There was something really funny happened yesterday, and because I was rank 1, like I've been rank 1 a bunch, and I've been playing the best of 1 ladder while I'm rank 1 on best of 3 ladder. And then, like, I was showing the rankings to someone new, and, like, then I accidentally queued up. At rank 1, and what happened was, like the ending to I don't know if any of you saw that, but the ending to the last game was something like, it's just like, it was something insane. So that video should be out by the time of this is, so check it out, guys. What does it look like when you queue up accidentally at rank 1? Savjz Lorcana.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, if you listen to this podcast, you enjoy it, number thing you do is leave us a review on pod platforms, so Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps so much. The video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. just headbutt that like button while you're there and smash that subscribe. It's all
Join
YouTube
the
cares
Discord.
about.
Join the Discord. for
Discord,
sure.
link in the description. Tons of discussion going on there. Upcoming news for merch coming out as well. So check that out. Finally, Twitter's at Brendan APG, Kawatech_CG, at Savjz, and at Moin_HS. Thank y'all so much for listening. Good luck in your store championships. We'll see you next week.